My name is Sophia Hayes, and I am 33 years old. If you have ever sat in your own living room and suddenly realized the people closest to you were treating your life like a set piece for their perfect little show, you already know the particular flavor of sick that settles in your stomach. I heard it first as a low, tight argument drifting from the kitchen while the rest of us were supposed to be settling in for the surprise visit. My mother had shown up unannounced with my father and my younger sister Isabella that Friday afternoon, the kind of spontaneous drop-in that used to feel warm and now just felt like another performance I had to manage. Chloe, my best friend since college, had just happened to be in Lancaster that weekend and offered to help with dinner. Lucas, my boyfriend of almost 2 years, had driven in from Philadelphia the night before. Everyone was smiling for the photos my mother kept insisting we take in front of the old brick row house that had been in my family for 4 generations. And then I heard Chloe's voice low and sharp through the cracked door. We can't keep pretending the place is some charming historic money pit. If we're going to use the family name for the launch, it needs to look like we actually have the resources behind it. Lucas answered even quieter, but I caught the words equity release, and she won't notice if we move slow. I stood there in the hallway holding a tray of iced tea, the ice clinking too loud in the sudden quiet of my own head. If any of this sounds familiar, if you have ever watched someone you loved rewrite your life to fit the version of themselves they wanted the world to see, comment below and tell me the moment it first clicked for you. I read every single one. I carried the tray into the living room like nothing had happened because that is what you do when your best friend and your boyfriend are casually discussing how to repackage your great-grandmother's house as their personal status upgrade. Chloe looked up from the couch, all bright eyes and perfect posture, and said, "Sophia, your mom was just telling us how proud she is that you kept the family home. It really does photograph so well for the brand." She said the word brand like it was a sacred thing. My mother beamed. My father nodded like this was normal conversation. Isabella, who had just turned 28 and still thought Chloe walked on water, laughed and asked if we could take another picture on the front steps before the light changed. Lucas came in from the kitchen a minute later, wiped his hands on a dish towel like he lived here, and kissed the top of my head in front of everyone. The kiss landed too deliberately. I felt the eyes of the room on us and realized Chloe had already positioned herself as the helpful best friend who just gets how important family image is. She had been doing it for months, subtle comments about how my Instagram looked a little quiet lately, how the house could use a refresh that still honors the history, how Lucas was so good at seeing the bigger picture financially. I had laughed it off every time because Chloe was the one who had held my hair back after my last breakup, who had helped me paint the upstairs bedrooms when I first moved in full-time 2 years ago. She was supposed to be the person who knew the real version of me, not the curated one. The rest of that evening passed in a blur of forced laughter and carefully angled photos. Chloe kept steering conversations toward legacy and what we're building. Lucas kept agreeing, throwing in little asides about how smart it would be to unlock some of the equity for the right opportunities. My mother ate it up. My father asked thoughtful questions about real estate trends. Isabella took notes on her phone like she was learning how successful people talked. I smiled and passed the salad and felt something cold and hard forming behind my ribs. Later, after everyone had gone to bed in the guest rooms and the pull-out couch, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and tried to convince myself I had misheard. The house was old and the walls were thin. Maybe they had been talking about something else entirely. Chloe had always been ambitious. Lucas had always been practical about money. Maybe this was just how people in their 30s talked now. I opened my messages to scroll back through the group chat we all shared and accidentally tapped the voice message Chloe had sent me 2 days earlier. I had meant to play the one from my sister. Instead, her voice filled the quiet kitchen, low and conspiratorial, clearly never meant for me to hear twice. "You have to frame it like it's for her own good," Chloe said, the recording slightly muffled like she was walking while she talked. "Sophia gets weird about the house because it's the last thing tying her to her family's old money reputation. If we present it as a way to honor that reputation while actually making it work for the brand, launch, she'll go along with it. Lucas already has the paperwork ready for the equity line. We just need her signature on the family trust update, and we're golden. The photos from this weekend will be perfect proof that the whole family is on board. I played it again, then a third time. My hands were shaking so hard the phone kept slipping on the table. The voice message had been sent to Lucas, not to me. She had forwarded it by accident or maybe thought she deleted it. Either way, it was there in my chat history, now time-stamped undeniable. They were not talking about some abstract investment. They were talking about my house, the one I had poured every spare dollar and every weekend into restoring because it was the only piece of my family that still felt like mine. They wanted to mortgage it, rebrand it, and use the photos from my mother's surprise visit as social proof that the family supported whatever launch Chloe was planning for her lifestyle consulting business. I sat there until almost 3 in the morning listening to that message on loop and then scrolling through months of forgotten bank statements I had never bothered to question. And Lucas handled most of the joint account transfers because he was better with numbers. Chloe had been the one encouraging me to let him help with the household finances after I complained about how overwhelming it all felt. There, buried in the statements from 4 months ago, was a small transfer labeled consulting fee C. Bennett that I did not remember approving. Then another one 2 months later. Nothing huge, just enough to look like normal expense sharing if you were not looking for it. The next morning I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Chloe laughing with my mother in the kitchen about how Sophia has always been the sentimental one in the family. I stood in the doorway for a second watching them. Chloe was wearing one of my aprons and posing for a quick story my mother wanted to post. Lucas was at the table with his laptop open, showing my father some preliminary numbers on a shared screen. When Chloe saw me, she smiled the same warm, familiar smile she had given me for 12 years and said, "Morning, sleepyhead. We were just talking about how beautiful the light is in here for content. You should really let us help you document the renovation process. It would be such good inspo for other women trying to hold on to family homes." I smiled back. It felt like my face might crack. That afternoon, while everyone was out on a walk through downtown Lancaster, I went into the small study off the living room and pulled the old accordion file of bank records I had shoved in a drawer months ago and forgotten. The numbers were worse than I thought. Small transfers had become larger ones. There was a line of credit application started in both our names that I had never signed. Chloe's name appeared on an email thread I was not copied on, discussing repositioning the property as a branded content house. They had been building this for at least 6 months, maybe longer, all while Chloe kept telling me how proud she was of me for finally prioritizing family legacy, and Lucas kept saying he loved how grounded I was compared to other women he had dated. I closed the file and sat on the floor with my back against the old radiator. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Margaret Ellison, the neighbor who had lived next door since before I was born, talking to someone on her porch about how the row houses on this block used to be full of real families who actually knew each other's names. She had always been kind to me in that brisk, no-nonsense way older women in historic districts sometimes are. She had brought me soup when I first moved in alone. She had never once asked to take a photo in front of my house for someone else's brand. When the others came back from the walk, Chloe immediately started suggesting we take a group photo on the front steps while the light is still good. My mother agreed instantly. Isabella was already fixing her hair. Lucas looked at me and said, "Come on, babe, it'll be nice to have one with everyone together." I looked at Chloe's expectant face and felt something sharp and final settle into place. I told them I needed a minute. I walked out the back door across the small shared yard and knocked on Mrs. Ellison's screen door. She opened it, took one look at my face, and said, "You look like you just found out the people you trusted were counting your silverware while you slept. Come in before they see you standing here looking like that." I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything, not because I expected her to fix it, but because I needed to hear the words out loud in a room where no one was trying to take a picture of me. Mrs. Ellison listened without interrupting. When I finished, she poured me a glass of water and said, "That house has been in your family longer than most of these young people have been alive. If they want to turn it into a prop, they can do it with their own money and their own names. You do not owe them your signature or your silence." I stayed at her table until the lights started to fade. When I finally walked back across the yard, Chloe was waiting on the back steps with her phone in her hand and that same concerned best friend expression she had perfected over a decade. "Everything okay?" "You disappeared for a while. We were starting to worry." I looked at her and felt the last thread of the story I had been telling myself about who she was snap cleanly in two. I heard the voice message I said. My voice came out flat and almost polite. "The one you sent Lucas about the equity line and the family trust update. I also found the transfers." Chloe's face did something complicated and fast surprise, then calculation, then the smooth, wounded look she always used when she wanted people to feel sorry for her. "Sophia, that is not what it sounded like. We were trying to protect you from having to make all these decisions alone. The house is a lot for one person. Lucas and I just wanted to help you see the opportunities." Lucas appeared behind her in the doorway, hands in his pockets, already shifting into the reasonable guy tone he used when he wanted me to feel dramatic. "Babe, let's not do this out here where the neighbors can hear. Come inside and we can talk like adults." I stayed where I was on the grass. Mrs. Ellison already heard, I said. "She thinks it is interesting how many people suddenly care about the historic value of this house the second they think they can monetize it." Chloe's expression cracked for half a second before she recovered. "You went to the neighbor before you even talked to us. That is really hurtful, Sophia. After everything I have done for you." I almost laughed. The sound that came out was small and bitter. "Everything you have done for me has apparently included planning how to use my house and my family name without ever asking what I wanted. I am done being the person who provides the backdrop for everyone else's perfect story." I turned and walked back into the house. My mother was in the living room holding her phone up, trying to get the right angle for another photo. She looked up when I came in and said, "There you are. We were just about to call you. Chloe said the light is perfect right now." I looked at my mother, my father, my sister, my best friend, and my boyfriend, all of them waiting for me to step into the frame they had already decided on. For the first time in my life, I did not feel guilty for ruining the picture. I picked up my keys from the hook by the door. "I am going for a drive," I said. "When I come back, I would like everyone to be gone. We can talk about the house and the accounts and whatever else you have planned once I have had time to speak with a lawyer. Until then, please do not post any more photos of my home or my family without asking me first." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had heard in months. Chloe opened her mouth like she was going to say something wounded and reasonable. Lucas took a step forward like he was going to reason with me. My mother looked genuinely confused, like I had just spoken in a language she did not recognize. Isabella was the only one who looked even a little bit guilty. I did not wait for any of them to answer. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove until the lights of downtown Lancaster blurred into something softer. My hands were still shaking on the wheel, but for the first time in a very long time, I was not shaking because I was afraid of what I might lose. I was shaking because I had finally said the thing I had been swallowing for months. The house was still mine when I drove back 2 hours later. The lights were off. Everyone had left. On the kitchen table was a note in Chloe's handwriting that said, "Only call me when you are ready to talk like adults." I crumpled it and threw it in the trash without reading it again. Mrs. Ellison's porch light was still on. I walked across the yard and knocked. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and said, "You did the hard part. The rest is just paperwork and learning how to be alone in your own house again. Come in, I made tea." I sat at her table for a long time that night. We did not talk much. She did not tell me I had overreacted, or that family was complicated, or that maybe Chloe and Lucas had good intentions underneath the bad execution. She just let me sit there until the shaking stopped and the house next door felt like mine again instead of a prop I had been keeping polished for other people's photos. When I finally went home, I locked the door behind me, turned off every light except the one in the upstairs hallway, and stood in the middle of the living room for a long time. The walls were quiet. No one was waiting to take a picture. No one was waiting for me to smile and say the right thing about legacy or opportunity or family image. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel like something I had to fill. It just felt like mine. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed with the kind of headache that comes from crying in the dark and then pretending you did not. The house was quiet in a way that should have felt peaceful, but instead felt like the first day of a life I had not asked for. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the old accordion file again. This time I did not stop at the transfers I already knew about. I went all the way back to the statements from last summer, the ones I had shoved in the drawer after Lucas offered to handle the boring money stuff so I could focus on restoring the upstairs bedrooms. There it was, buried between a grocery receipt and a note about the roof repair. A small equity inquiry started in both our names 4 months ago. Lucas had signed my name on the preliminary paperwork. The signature was close enough that a bank might not have questioned it if I had never looked. Next to it was an email printout Chloe had forwarded to him with the subject line Family Home as branded asset, talking points for Sophia. She had written out an entire script for how he should present the idea to me, complete with phrases like honoring your grandmother's legacy while giving it new life and creating something that reflects the family's values in today's economy. I read it twice. Then I laughed a short, ugly sound that echoed off the old plaster walls. Chloe had always been good at presentations. I just never realized she would eventually give one about how to repackage me. By 10 o'clock, my phone had already lit up 3 times. First, my mother asking if I was feeling better and whether we could all sit down like adults before she and my father drove back to Philadelphia. Then Isabella texting in the careful way she always did when she was stuck between people she loved. Soph Mom is really upset. Chloe says you misunderstood everything. Can we talk? And then Chloe herself, 3 messages in a row, each one softer and more wounded than the last. I hate that it came out this way. I was trying to protect you from having to carry everything alone. Lucas and I both love you. Please don't shut us out before we can explain. I did not answer any of them. Instead, I called the only person in Lancaster I trusted to tell me the truth without trying to make it prettier. Mrs. Margaret Ellison picked up on the second ring and said, "You sound like you spent the night reading things you were never supposed to see. Come over. I made too much coffee anyway." I walked across the yard in yesterday's clothes. She let me in without asking questions and pointed to the same chair at her kitchen table. While I drank the coffee she had already poured, she told me she had lived next door since 1978 and had watched 3 different families try to turn these old row houses into something they were not. The ones who succeed are the ones who decide what the house means to them first, she said. The ones who fail are the ones who let other people decide for them and then act surprised when the house stops feeling like home. She did not tell me what to do. She just sat there until I stopped shaking and could say the words out loud. "I think I have to talk to a lawyer," I said. Mrs. Ellison nodded like this was the most ordinary sentence in the world. "Alan Pierce has an office 2 blocks from the square. He handled my late husband's will and never once tried to sell me on anything I did not ask for. Tell him Margaret sent you. He will listen before he starts billing you." I made the appointment for that afternoon. While I was getting ready, my phone rang again. This time it was Lucas. I let it go to voicemail and then played the message on speaker while I brushed my hair. His voice was calm and reasonable, the same tone he used when he explained why we should skip a vacation so he could put a little more into the joint account. "Sophia, I know you are upset, and I get why the voice message sounded bad out of context. Chloe and I were brainstorming worst-case scenarios because we both care about you and this house. We were never going to do anything without your full agreement. Can we please just sit down and look at the numbers together? I think you will see it actually protects you in the long run." I saved the voicemail, not because I planned to listen to it again, but because I wanted a record of exactly how he sounded when he was still trying to manage me. The meeting with Mr. Alan Pierce lasted 40 minutes. He was in his late 50s, wore a tie that looked older than I was, and did not once call me sweetheart or tell me I was overreacting. He took the folder of statements and the printed voice message, read through them once, and said, "Your boyfriend forged your signature on a credit inquiry, and your best friend documented a plan to use your family home as marketing collateral without your knowledge. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a problem with paper trails. We can start by sending a formal letter requesting they cease any further action on the property and provide a full accounting of every transfer from the joint account. If they push back, we escalate." He did not ask me if I was sure. He did not suggest I give them one more chance to explain. He just told me what the next legal step looked like and how much it would probably cost. I walked out of his office feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because someone had finally said the words without trying to soften them. Heavier because saying the words out loud made it real in a way that even the voice message had not. This was not going to end with an apology and a group hug. This was going to end with paperwork and boundaries and probably the loss of people I had once believed would still be in my life when I was old. When I got home, Chloe's car was parked in front of the house. She was sitting on the front steps with a cardboard box on her lap like she was returning something she had borrowed. Isabella was with her. My sister looked uncomfortable in the way she always did when she was forced to pick a side. Chloe stood up when she saw me and held out the box. "I brought back the books I borrowed last month and the sweater you lent me for that work event. I figured you would want them." Her voice was quiet and careful. The same tone she used when she wanted people to feel sorry for her without her having to say she was sorry. Isabella shifted from one foot to the other. "Soph, can we just talk for 5 minutes? Mom is freaking out and Dad keeps asking if you are okay. Chloe says there is a way to fix this without lawyers if everyone just calms down." I looked at my sister and felt the old reflex to make things easier for her rise up and then die. Isabella had always been the one who wanted everyone to get along. She had never been the one who had to carry the consequences when they did not. "Isabella, I am not the one who needs to calm down," I said. "I am the one who found out my best friend and my boyfriend were planning to mortgage the house I restored with my own money so they could use it for Chloe's brand launch. If anyone needs to calm down, it is the two people who spent 6 months lying to my face while smiling for photos in my living room." Chloe's expression shifted into the wounded one she had perfected. "I cannot believe you are framing it like that. I have been your best friend for 12 years. I helped you paint every room in this house. I held you when you cried about your grandmother's funeral. And now you are acting like I am some kind of con artist because I tried to help you see the financial reality of keeping a historic home." "You did not try to help me see anything," I said. "You wrote a script for my boyfriend to read to me so I would sign away equity without asking too many questions. You used my family's name and my mother's love of photos to create social proof for whatever you are launching. That is not friendship. That is strategy." Isabella looked between us like she wanted to disappear into the brick sidewalk. "Maybe we should all just take a breath and meet tomorrow when everyone has slept," she said. I shook my head. "I already met with a lawyer this afternoon. The letter goes out tomorrow morning. Until then, I would like you both to leave." Chloe set the box down on the top step like it was evidence of her goodwill. "You are making a mistake that is going to cost you more than just some money, Sophia. People are going to hear about this. They are going to wonder why you turned on your own best friend and your boyfriend over a house. You have always been the one who cared more about things than about people." The words landed exactly where she wanted them to. For a second, I felt the old shame rise up, the one that had always made me apologize first, the one that had made me keep quiet when Chloe rearranged my life to fit her narrative. Then I looked at the box she had brought full of things that had once felt like proof of a real friendship, and the shame turned into something cleaner and colder. "I would rather lose the people who only liked me when I was useful than keep pretending this house and my name belonged to anyone but me," I said. "You can tell whoever you want whatever story makes you feel better. I am done performing for it." I picked up the box, carried it inside, and closed the door. Through the window, I watched Chloe and Isabella walk back to Chloe's car. Isabella turned once and looked at the house like she was trying to memorize it. Chloe did not look back at all. That night I changed the locks. It felt dramatic and petty and completely necessary. The locksmith was a quiet man in his 40s who did not ask why a single woman in a historic row house suddenly needed new deadbolts on a Tuesday. He just did the work, took my card, and left. When he was gone, I stood in the hallway and listened to the new quiet. No one had a key anymore except me. No one could let themselves in with a smile and a story about how they were only trying to help. The calls kept coming. My mother left a voicemail that started reasonable and ended with her crying about how she did not understand why I was punishing the whole family for something Chloe and Lucas had done. My father sent a text that said, "Only call your mother." Isabella sent one more message at midnight. "I don't know what to think anymore. I just don't want to lose you too." I did not answer any of them. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder from Mr. Alan Pierce and started making a list of every single thing I was willing to lose. The spontaneous weekend visits from my parents, the group texts that used to feel like connection, the version of Chloe I had carried in my head for 12 years, the future I had imagined with Lucas where we eventually got married and maybe even had kids in this house. I wrote it all down in the same notebook I used for grocery lists because some things deserve to be treated like ordinary chores instead of tragedies. By Thursday, the letter from the lawyer had gone out. Chloe responded first through her own lawyer with a long email full of phrases like emotional distress and reputational harm, and we were acting in good faith based on prior conversations. Lucas sent a single text that said, "I hope you are happy with what you have done to us." I saved both and forwarded them to Mr. Alan Pierce without replying. Mrs. Ellison came over that evening with a casserole and the kind of blunt advice that only older women who have outlived their own bullshit can give. They are going to keep trying to make you the villain because it is easier than admitting they got caught with their hands in your wallet and your family's good name. Let them. The people who matter will eventually ask you what actually happened. The ones who do not ask were never really on your side anyway. She was right, of course. By the end of the week, my social media had gone quiet in a way that felt both freeing and lonely. A few mutual friends had messaged asking what was going on. I gave them the same short answer every time I found out some things about how Chloe and Lucas were handling money in the house. I am dealing with it through a lawyer. I would rather not turn it into public drama. Most of them stopped asking after that. One or two kept pushing, wanting the full story so they could decide whose side to take. I stopped answering those too. The spontaneous weekend visits from my parents stopped without anyone saying they were stopping. My mother sent one more text about how she hoped I would come to my senses before the holidays. I did not respond. Isabella called once and left a voicemail that sounded like she was crying. I saved that one too, not because I planned to use it, but because I wanted to remember that even the people I loved could choose comfort over truth when it was easier. On the 8th day after I changed the locks, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a private story Chloe had posted the night before. In it, she was sitting in a cafe with Lucas, both of them looking appropriately devastated, with the caption, "When the people you love most choose money and houses over actual relationships." Some lessons are expensive. The story had already been viewed by most of our shared circle. I stared at it for a long time. Then I did something I had never done before in 12 years of friendship. I blocked her number, blocked Lucas's number, and blocked every mutual account I could find. It felt petty. It felt necessary. It felt like the first honest thing I had done in months. Mrs. Ellison was right about one thing and wrong about another. The people who mattered did eventually ask. But by the time they did, I had already stopped needing their approval to know what had actually happened in my own house. 2 weeks after I blocked every number and account connected to Chloe and Lucas, the letter from Mr. Alan Pierce finally got a real response. It came in the form of a single text from an unknown number at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. "We need to talk." in person, before this gets worse for everyone. It was signed with Chloe's name, even though I had already blocked her on everything that mattered. I stared at it for a long time before I replied with the only thing that still felt true. One conversation. My house. Tomorrow at 6. Bring Lucas if you want. After that, we communicate through lawyers. I spent the next 24 hours cleaning the house in a way that felt almost ceremonial. Not because I wanted it to look perfect for them, but because I needed every surface to remind me that this place belonged to me and no one else. I moved the old family photos into a box in the attic and replaced them with pictures I had taken myself during the renovation close-ups of the brickwork, the new kitchen tile, the garden I had planted with my own hands. When I was finished, the rooms felt smaller and more honest. They no longer looked like a backdrop for someone else's brand story. Mrs. Margaret Ellison came over at 5 with a plate of cookies she claimed she had made too many of. She did not ask if I wanted company during the conversation. She simply said, "If it gets ugly, you can come knock on my door and I will sit with you until it passes. You do not have to do the hard parts alone just because you chose to do the right ones." I thanked her and meant it more than I had meant most things in months. They arrived at exactly 6. Chloe, first then Lucas, a step behind her like he was still trying to decide whose side the reasonable person should take. Chloe looked tired in a way that was probably calculated to make me feel guilty. Lucas looked like a man who had already practiced his lines. I let them in and pointed to the kitchen table where I had left 3 glasses of water and nothing else. No snacks, no small talk, no photos. Chloe sat down and folded her hands like she was about to lead a meeting. "Sophia, we came because we still care about you and because this does not have to end with lawyers and blocked numbers. There is a way to make this work for everyone if you will just listen." I did not sit. I stayed standing with my back against the counter so I could see both of them at once. "I already listened," I said. "I listened to the voice message you accidentally sent me. I listened to every transfer you made from the joint account. I listened to the script you wrote for Lucas about how to talk me into signing away equity on my own house. I am done listening to explanations that sound like apologies until I do what you want." Lucas leaned forward with his reasonable face on. "The equity line was never meant to be used without your signature. We were just exploring options in case the renovation costs went over. Chloe was trying to protect you from having to make every decision when you were already overwhelmed." I pulled my phone out of my pocket and played the voice message on speaker. Chloe's voice filled the kitchen exactly as it had the first night I heard it. When it ended, I set the phone down between us. That does not sound like protection to me. That sounds like 2 people who spent 6 months treating my home and my family name like inventory for a brand launch they never bothered to tell me about. Chloe's eyes filled with tears that looked almost real. "I cannot believe you are still holding on to one message instead of 12 years of friendship. I have been there for every breakup, every family fight, every time you doubted yourself. And now you are willing to burn all of it because you found some numbers that scared you." The sarcasm that had been living in my chest for weeks finally came out clean and sharp. "You are right about one thing. I am scared. I am scared of how easy it was for my best friend to turn my grandmother's house into a marketing asset and my boyfriend into her co-signer. I am scared of how many photos my mother took of us smiling in this kitchen while the 2 of you were already planning how to sell pieces of it. And I am scared of how long I would have kept smiling if that voice message had not played by accident." Lucas tried one more time. "We can still fix this. We can unwind the credit inquiry. We can delete the talking points. We can go back to how things were before you decided everything had to be a betrayal." I looked at him and felt the last soft place inside me go quiet. "Before I decided, you decided the second you signed my name on paperwork I never saw. Chloe decided the second she wrote that script. I am not the one who changed the rules. I am just the one who finally read them." Chloe stood up so fast her chair scraped the old wood floor. "You are going to regret this. People are already asking questions. They are already choosing sides. When they hear you cut off your best friend and your boyfriend over a house, they are not going to see a strong woman setting boundaries. They are going to see someone who chose money and walls over actual relationships. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Then let them see whatever makes them comfortable. I would rather be the woman who chose her own house than the woman who kept smiling while other people redecorated her life. They left without another word. Lucas held the door for Chloe like they were still a united front. She did not look back. I stood in the kitchen until their car pulled away and the street went quiet again. Then I sat down at the table, put my head in my hands, and cried until my throat hurt and my eyes felt swollen shut. It was not quiet, dignified crying. It was the kind that comes when you finally admit you have lost people you thought would still be there when you were old, and you are the one who chose to lose them. Mrs. Ellison found me like that an hour later. She did not knock. She used the spare key I had given her 2 days earlier and let herself in. She made tea without asking and sat across from me until the crying slowed. "You did the hardest part," she said. "The rest is just learning how to live in the quiet you chose." The weeks after that were lonelier than I had expected. The spontaneous weekend visits from my parents stopped completely. My mother sent one final text that said she hoped I would find my way back to family before the holidays, and then went silent. Isabella called twice more and left voicemails that sounded smaller each time. I saved them but never called back. The group chats went dark. Mutual friends stopped reaching out. Chloe posted one last story about choosing peace over toxicity and then disappeared from my feed entirely. Lucas never texted again. I started seeing Dr. Elena Vargas twice a month because Mrs. Ellison said it was cheaper than carrying the whole thing alone, and because I had finally run out of reasons to pretend I did not need help. Dr. Vargas was in her 40s, spoke in a calm voice that never tried to rush me and never once suggested I should try to repair things with Chloe or Lucas for the sake of closure. She just listened while I said all the bitter, sarcastic things I had been swallowing for months and then helped me figure out what I actually wanted the rest of my life to look like now that the performance was over. One afternoon in late fall, I was raking leaves in the small front garden when Rachel Klein, an old college friend I had not spoken to in years, walked past with her dog. She stopped at the gate and said, "I heard some things. I wanted to check on you myself instead of believing the version that was easiest to repeat." We ended up talking for almost an hour on the front steps. She did not ask for the full story. She just said she was sorry people she had once liked had treated me like an accessory and that she was glad I still had the house. It was the first conversation in months that did not feel like an audition or a negotiation. By winter, the house felt like mine again in a way it never had while I was still trying to keep everyone else comfortable inside it. I painted the upstairs hallway the exact shade of blue I had wanted for years, but had been talked out of because it might not photograph as well. I started having dinner with Mrs. Ellison once a week and sometimes with Rachel when she was in town. The spontaneous visits never came back. The group texts stayed silent. My mother sent a card at Christmas with no return address and a note that said, "Only thinking of you." I put it in the box with the old photos and did not send one back. There were nights when the quiet felt like punishment instead of peace. I would sit in the living room with the lights off and let myself feel every single thing I had lost. The easy laughter with Chloe, the future I had pictured with Lucas, the version of my family that had existed before I stopped performing for it. Those nights I cried again sometimes for hours because choosing yourself does not mean the loss stops hurting. It just means you stop pretending the loss was not real. But the mornings after those nights were different. I would wake up in my own bed, make coffee in my own kitchen, and look out at the row houses on the block that had survived worse than one woman deciding her home was not for sale. Mrs. Ellison would wave from her porch. Rachel would text a picture of her dog wearing a ridiculous sweater. Dr. Elena Vargas would remind me in our next session that boundaries are not punishment. They are information. And slowly, without anyone's permission or approval, the house stopped feeling like a stage set and started feeling like the place I was going to grow old in on my own terms. I still have the notebook where I wrote down everything I was willing to lose. It lives in the drawer next to the old bank statements. Sometimes I open it and read the list out loud just to remember how far I have come from the woman who used to apologize for wanting her own life to belong to her. The names on that list are still gone. The spontaneous weekend visits never returned. The group photos stopped forever. But the house is still here, and so am I. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, comment freedom below. I would love to hear how you found your way back to your own quiet.